This is an absolute shock. Michael Saylor is not buying Bitcoin with his company strategy for the first time in many weeks. Is this the end of MicroStrategy or is this just the beginning? Because at the same time, the man is announcing new purchases worth $4.2 billion US. Let's fucking go. Michael Saylor is going all in, and now we have the craziest treasury companies, one after another, announcing Bitcoin purchases, Metaplanet and many other banks that are now getting into Bitcoin. New banks that we need to take a look at. We have new Bitcoin price predictions. Let's take a look at all of this now, before we dive right in. But smash that like button down below for new all-time highs, for new Bitcoin all-time highs, so Bitcoin can really break through here. If you haven't subscribed yet, smash that like button down below for me. But first, let's check out what's going on at Strategy, Michael Saylor's company, because for the first time in a very long time, there haven't been any purchases made this week. And at first you might think this is negative, since people have been asking, did something happen with Michael Saylor or something? Why aren't they buying any more Bitcoin here? And Michael Saylor more or less hinted at this yesterday. He posted yesterday, sometimes you just have to hodl, meaning not sell your Bitcoin. And at the same time, you don't always have to buy new Bitcoin. And of course, Michael Saylor already knew that if he announced he wasn't buying Bitcoin, since the markets always expect him to buy Bitcoin, then maybe there could be some backlash. That's why he took the opportunity and used this brief pause in Bitcoin purchases to make an announcement. Let's take a look at that now. Here, the company strategy wants to raise up to $4.2 billion by issuing its third preferred stock, Stride, for further Bitcoin purchases. Strategy can now issue MicroStrategy common shares and the preferred shares Strike, Strive, and Stride on the market to raise more money. So they're handling this very, very cleverly from a tactical standpoint. There haven't been any purchases here lately, maybe because they're just taking a break, or perhaps they didn't have the right capital vehicles available. Maybe there's just not enough capital to raise at the moment, or according to Saylor, it's simply not the right time to dilute the shares right now. Maybe the premium isn't high enough, or they want to keep a bit of a buffer or something like that. I don't know the exact reasons, but in any case, they're now announcing massive upcoming purchases, and that's the positive spin. They're basically turning the so-called negative into something positive. And that's something Mike Saylor does really smartly. He understands the market and also gets what investors want from him. What does he have to do here to avoid being punished by the market, so to speak? And even when there are quiet periods, he still manages to use them pretty smartly. And then, at the same time, a presentation is released where Strategy goes over their entire strategy and also publishes a report, specifically, Strategy reports 14 billion in total Bitcoin fair value appreciation in Q2. And I haven't watched the whole video yet. I still need to watch it. If there are any interesting special details in there, I'll post them in the next video. But right now, we have a fair value account gain, an unrealized gain of 14 billion. That means Strategy's total assets increased by $14 billion in the last quarter, according to what's called fair value accounting. That's really, really important. That's exactly what Michael Saylor told me as well. Fair value accounting is so important for companies because now we have unrealized gains here, and they're being recorded on the balance sheet. You can see from this just how massively Bitcoin can impact the portfolios of companies or treasury firms. That Bitcoin as a corporate strategy, like with MicroStrategy here, can have a huge effect on the balance sheet, and shareholders or ETF investors are now getting a bullish signal. And what's wild is that the whole treasury story is still picking up steam, even if you look at Michael Saylor's account today. He has retweeted so many treasury companies here, and that's what's crazy. That Saylor benefits when other treasury companies also skyrocket, because it just fuels the whole treasury hype even more. Feel free to let me know in the comments below whether you prefer Bitcoin as self-custody, or as a treasury company, or if you do something else, like ETFs or whatever. I actually think that these things aren't mutually exclusive, because a lot of people always say, okay, wow, the way Michael Saylor is doing this, it's going to lead to the end of Bitcoin, and in the bear market, Strategy is going to collapse. But you really have to make a clear distinction here. I always say, guys, get self-custody, use self-custody, get yourself a TREZOR hardware wallet. Some people even put the link to a TREZOR hardware wallet. That is absolutely the base investment. And what these treasury companies are about isn't about competing with Bitcoin as self-custody. By the way, you can use Bitcoin as hardware if you want to keep it in a hardware wallet. The idea here isn't to make Bitcoin a self-custody competitor, but rather to go after the 300 trillion bond market. And for that, of course, you need several treasury companies. So let's take a look at who has already announced new purchases just today. So Metaplanet is planning to buy another 2,000 Bitcoin here, and then Blockchain Group wants to buy 116 Bitcoin, or actually, that's not correct, they've already bought them. So Metaplanet has already bought, Blockchain Group has bought, and Smart Web Company has also bought another 200 Bitcoin. And these are really crazy companies. For example, the Blockchain Group is definitely inspired by Michael Saylor. Here, Metaplanet with Simon Gavridge, they're definitely inspired by Michael Saylor too. Smart Web Company, they've also already had a meeting with Michael Saylor. So you can really see how Michael Saylor is building up his army of Bitcoin treasury companies, and that's just really massive. And then there were also a few more reports of additional purchases, and the Block Trainer is reporting on this, which is really great. So here, for example, Similar Scientific, who want to buy another 187 Bitcoin. Then we have Consilium, who want to buy 14.9 Bitcoin. And then there's LQVD Technologies, who want to buy 10 Bitcoin. And even if it's just 14 here, 10 there, or 100 Bitcoin somewhere else, I mean, it all adds up. And when you put it together, it's just massive buying pressure that's coming in. And that's also the reason why many people say there won't be a classic bear market anymore, because institutional interest is just way too high. And that's what's so crazy about it. The institutions are all in, but regular people still just don't get it. And sometimes it honestly hurts to watch. And now it gets even crazier. We also have this whole story here. The publicly listed real estate company Murano announces they will buy 500 million in Bitcoin. So, this probably isn't a treasury company, but rather a real estate company that's pumping its surplus into Bitcoin. Then we actually have an acquisition here. The company CoreWeave is buying Bitcoin miner Core Scientific for $9 billion US, according to Bloomberg. This would be the largest acquisition in the history of Bitcoin mining. The translation says, in the history of mining. That means we're also seeing massive acquisitions happening right now. And now it gets even crazier. So, we've got the treasury companies, we've got the mining companies, and now the big banks are all getting involved too. Here we have Spain's second largest bank, which has just added Bitcoin to its app, and that's BBVA. And over the weekend, I also had a really interesting conversation with Lottie Daniel Troster, who's also deeply involved in the banking space and works closely with many banks that are either getting into Bitcoin now or will be getting into Bitcoin soon. He also told me some really fascinating stories, which I can't announce publicly here, about what's going on at the banks and what the processes are like for them to onboard Bitcoin. And of course, these are very long processes, sometimes taking 2 years, 3 years, or a year or so before a bank is finally on board. But the crazy thing you need to know is, they're all coming now. And when one comes, the others have to follow, then the next one comes, and then they have to follow too. And that's just a really wild story, a truly incredible momentum that's building up here. I'm actually seeing a poll here from Sanity Crease, asking whether MicroStrategy will trigger the biggest financial disaster in human history. And they say, 33% true and 67% say false. So I would definitely lean towards false here as well. Not just lean towards false, the question itself is kind of exaggerated. The biggest financial disaster. There have been bigger financial disasters. If we take a look, the bond market, what's happening there? The bond market that's tied up with the banks, the stock market that's inflated, the real estate market that's inflated. So there are much bigger problems out there. And MicroStrategy doesn't even have that higher proportion of debt capital. Sure, a few small companies might go bust here, no question about it. But the big companies here, like Strategy, they're handling things very confidently. And if we look at Michael Saylor, he's doing some really cool and, in my opinion, very smart operations. And if he keeps working at this level, I really don't see any issues here. But it's really important that you do your own research, and treasury companies are always much riskier than Bitcoin and self-custody. I think the worst thing you can do is just say, hey, I don't care about self-custody anymore. I'm only going for treasury companies, YOLO, all in on Metaplanet or something like that. I see that happening again and again. Just this weekend, I met people again who sold all their Bitcoin and put everything into treasury companies. Honestly, I think that kind of approach is just idiotic. But hey, everyone has to decide for themselves. Now let's take a look at some wild price predictions that are going to shock you. And here we have Peter Zhang, Presto's head of research, and he already gave a price target a few weeks or months ago, $210,000 US. And check this out, he's sticking to his price target, and that's really intense.
Are you sticking to the price target for Bitcoin? Could it go even higher or?
Yeah, I'm sticking with it, yes. And yeah, so I guess what was kind of surprising to us was how, I guess, stubborn the Jerome Powell has been with the rate decision. And I kind of share the same view with the Trump, I guess. Yeah.
So he's saying again here that his price target remains in place, 210,000 by the end of the year. And that here, too, he's a bit, I don't know, I didn't even catch the word, stubborn, with Jerome Powell. Maybe some of you understood it, but probably what he means is that he's been watching, probably with a lot of amusement, how Jerome Powell and Donald Trump keep butting heads, with Jerome Powell holding his ground while Donald Trump keeps pushing for lower interest rates, but it just doesn't happen and Jerome Powell keeps sticking to his course. But now we're getting to the really interesting points.
There are some signs that indicate that the liquidity loosening will happen in the next few months, such as the Trump's tax bill, and also the comments from a few Fed officials been quite dovish recently.
So money will definitely flow into the market. That's also what I always tell you, and it's nice to see that other experts see it the same way, saying, okay, the rate cuts are coming. Then there's the tax bill, that's the big beautiful bill he's talking about here, which will massively increase liquidity. And all of this will lead to us having massive catalysts in the background, catalysts that will pump the Bitcoin price upwards, because nothing is as crucial for Bitcoin as global liquidity. But he goes even further.
And also, there has been a rule change on the so-called the supplementary leverage ratio in the banking sector, which will allow the banks to hold additional $5 trillion worth of treasuries if it is implemented. So I think considering all of this, there are some reasons to hope that the liquidity conditions will improve substantially in second half.
And it's really, really important that we now have QE happening behind the scenes. This is the supplementary leverage ratio he's referring to here. I've already made several videos about this, that this will probably draw massive amounts of capital into the market again, because it's basically a kind of QE, since the banks are being incentivized to pump even more capital into the market through government bond purchases. And that alone could lead to even more power or even more momentum here. And Arthur Hayes often talks about the supplementary leverage ratios as well, which, however, have not yet been finally decided. There was only an initial meeting, and in that first meeting it was basically pre-approved, but it hasn't been finally decided yet that this will actually happen. So you shouldn't mix that up either. It's not officially confirmed yet, but it's very, very bullish for Bitcoin, and accordingly, I'm feeling very, very optimistic about the whole thing. I'm super bullish here. Feel free to let me know in the comments how things are looking for you. And if you still want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link below for 21 Bitcoin. With the code BitcoinHotel, you can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. See you. Until then, peace out.